And President Biden and top congressional leaders agreed to continue talks about raising the debt ceiling after a meeting Tuesday didn't move either side any closer to a compromise. Outside the room where it happens, White House allies and some legal experts have been pushing for creative solutions to do away with the problem of the debt ceiling altogether. One is to rely on the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. Section 4 of the amendment states, in part, the validity of the public debt authorized by law shall not be questioned. Some experts believe that this provision would allow President Biden to argue it is unconstitutional for the U.S. to fail to make payments even if the limit is not raised. Problem solved. Not so fast. This section came about after the Civil War. Confederate states had refused to pay their bills, leaving creditors with significant losses. If it was possible for the federal government to do the same thing and decide not to pay its bills, investors in the United States would be nervous or stay away altogether. This provision in the 14th Amendment closed off that option. Though this reading of the 14th Amendment has never been relied upon, some legal experts argue that there is historical precedent for a president to ignore one law in order to uphold every other one. During the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus, the right to a fair trial, to imprison Marylanders who he thought would push the state to secede from the Union. Lincoln defended the highly controversial decision, saying, quote, "Are all the laws but one to go unexecuted, and the government itself to go to pieces, lest that one be violated?" President Obama considered pursuing this strategy during the debt ceiling fights of 2011 and 2013, but decided against using it. President Biden said he had looked into the idea, but that it couldn't solve the current crisis. The move would lead to legal challenges, he explained, and meanwhile, the economic chaos from the U.S. not paying its bills would take place. The president did say, though, that he was looking at the idea to avoid these kinds of showdowns in the future. For more, let's bring in Jeff Stein, White House economics reporter for The Washington Post. Jeff, Biden said, well, can we put this 14th Amendment thing to bed? He said it's not an option. Is that still, you've been reporting so closely on it, is it dead as an option?
I would say no. So remember, just to back up for people, there's this red button that we have created that's like blow up the economy, right? And I don't know why we have it. It's been there for years and nobody has ever really threatened to use it. And now Republicans are saying maybe we hit this button. And so President Biden is going to keep even options that seem really wacky, even options that the White House is uncomfortable, even options that I think, and I have reporting from White House officials who are telling me they are very nervous that invoking the 14th Amendment to get around the debt ceiling could have tremendous negative consequences for the economy. So this is not at all like a magical solution that gets them out of this box in their view. But if we are at a position where they are so far apart that we are going to hit that button, I can't assure you, and no one in the White House, even if they're like, we don't want to do this, can assure you that if that button is about to be pressed, they won't do everything possible, even if it's this kind of out there idea to make that, to prevent that from happening.
So even though the president seemed to close it off yesterday, you're saying it's still somewhere in the deep reaches of the possible toolkit, though obviously not one they want to use.
I think they also, are looking at what would happen if they actually invoked it. And it's a little technical for people, but the issue here, right, is that the Treasury Department is not able to issue debt when we hit the debt limit. They cannot raise money that they need to fund the government operations. And that relies on basically an IOU that the government sells. They get money immediately and they pay back, interest and a principal over time. But if they do this unilaterally, what we're going to be in a world is where Republicans and the courts are maybe saying that this debt isn't valid. And even if the White House internally decides that the 14th Amendment is a valid way to strike down the debt ceiling, which I think a lot of them do think that, even in that world, the courts and Republicans can question the validity of the public debt issued by Treasury in a way that causes that big red button to get pressed. And so,
Well, and the markets price the debt at a crazy, weird premium because it's in this strange twilight era. Let me ask you about the meetings that took place at the White House. Um, Not to be a wise guy, as the president would say, but if the White House and congressional staff are meeting, what do they think they're meeting about? Because there's a disagreement about what this debate is about.
That's a great question, and I liked your metaphor on Twitter, searching for a literary analogy to explain the weirdness of this moment, where Biden has said over and over he's not negotiating over the debt limit. It sets a bad precedent. They think it's rewarding hostage taking, but I had a piece about this last week where my sense of what really shifted the debate here was that the Washington establishment that the White House thought would be on their side to sort of alienate and marginalize House Republicans as this radical, MAGA-inflected faction of renegades. The Washington establishment actually kind of sided with the Republicans. And so as a result, the White House had to come to the table and say, we will do an agreement over government spending. We will talk to you about government spending, and the sort of like Monty Python, like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, like say no more. Like we'll pretend that this debate is about government spending, but if it resolves the debt limit, then that solves our problem on the debt limit too, which I know is a little in the weeds for people, but important to understand that the White House may actually reward the hostage taking, right? They might agree to a government spending deal that cuts the government, maybe not as much as McCarthy wants, but a significant amount, and that Republicans can, I think, accurately say they won concessions on the debt limit, even though Biden will say, look, we had to fund the government anyway. We needed a deal at some point.
One possible concession, and let me know if there are any more, is yesterday or on Tuesday, the president said that pulling back some of the money from COVID-19 from the states he said it was on the table. That's one of the things Republicans would like to do. Is that the beginning of a possible set of elements that both sides might be able to agree on, which might be the beginnings of a deal?
I think that's maybe one of the easiest ones for them to agree on. I think also energy and permitting reform, something the White House wants to unlock energy projects all across the country, could be another element to the deal. The hard part is that Biden has said that he wants to increase the budget next year on this pool of money that we're talking about in the federal budget by about 6%. And McCarthy wants it to be cut by, has said this pool should be cut by 9%. When you exempt defense and veterans programs, as Republicans say they will, McCarthy's actually asking for something like a 23% cut to huge numbers of government programs that I think no part of the White House will accept. And so that gap is tremendous. And even if there are some areas potentially where I can see them coming together, how you square that circle in just a couple of weeks is just really hard to imagine. That's why I've been on Twitter being like, hey, I don't think the 14th Amendment is as simple of a solution as some people are pretending it is, but this is so hard to see how they get it done in a couple of weeks. I mean, the pressure will build, and once that happens, maybe Republicans really relent on their demands to cut trillions of dollars of spending, and maybe Biden agrees to more spending cuts. Maybe he sees this as a Clintonian triangulation moment that will redefine his presidency as a centrist deal maker. But I don't see most of the Democratic Party accepting anything like what is like the least that the Republicans can accept.
And if it's possible, quickly, Jeff, in the press conference on Tuesday, the president asked in response to a reporter's question, do you know the specific things that House Republicans want to cut? Explain why he's asking that question and who's got the right side of it. Because Speaker McCarthy will say, well, we were specific about our cuts. And this is about, basically what this comes down to, the details of what in the budget's going to be cut and what's going to be done on the tax side.
I think, frankly, a lot of people were really astounded by how strategically McCarthy played this. And I don't invest a moral valence to that, but he was able to design a program, a bill, that he accurately could describe as cutting $4.6 or $4.8 trillion from the federal deficit over 10 years without opening himself up to attacks that they would cut Meals on Wheels and veterans benefits and the military. And the way he did that was by saying, this big pool of money, it's called in Washington speak, non-defense discretionary, we'll cut this by a certain amount, but we won't say which programs. And so every time Democrats want to say, you're cutting veterans, you're cutting, healthcare by this much, McCarthy can accurately say, yeah, I never said that. But if you take his parameters to any of their possible inevitable conclusions, one of the outcomes that he would deny as being accurately attributable to his budget is certainly the case. There is no world in which none of the scenarios that what the White House has accused him of are inaccurate. However, McCarthy can accurately say each one is wrong, if that makes sense.
Jeff Stein, White House economics reporter at the Washington Post. Jeff, I could do this with you for a couple more hours, but
Anytime,
we're
John.
grateful for your time so far. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks so much, John.